Hello, and welcome to this recording brought to you by the British Council. Trains, Past, Present and Future, by John Russell. Why did railways develop? Railways are not a modern invention, as most of us think. The idea of transporting things and people on rails has been around for a long time. Rails were made of wood, stone or metal, and railway wagons were pulled by horses. Some were even wind-powered and had sails. At the start of the Industrial Revolution in Britain, people needed to transport raw materials such as coal, so created a network of canals and rail links between towns. But canals and horsepower were a very slow way to move things around the country, so the speed of railway wagons needed to be increased. How did steam engines help? By 1800, many industries were using steam engines designed by James Watt, from where we get the electrical measurement, watt. Richard Trevithick, a Cornish engineer, refined Watt's invention, and after failing to build a steam-powered road vehicle, he designed the first locomotive for an ironworks in Wales. He called it a puffer because of the noise it made, and on its first journey it travelled at almost 8 kilometres an hour. Unfortunately, it was so heavy that it broke the rails. It only made 3 journeys. But it had shown that steam engines could be used to move trains, and speeds began to increase. When was the first accident? By 1829, locomotives were travelling at speeds of over 45 kilometres an hour, and the first public railway had been opened, the Stockton and Darlington Railway. The most famous early locomotive was the Rocket. In 1833, it won a competition organised by the owners of the Manchester and Liverpool Railway to find the best locomotive for their new line. Unfortunately, during Parliament wasn't careful as he crossed the tracks, and the Rocket knocked him down. He died later. This was one of the first train accidents in history. What was the golden age of steam? The next 130 years can be described as a golden age of steam. Railways were built all over the world, and the size, speed and comfort of trains continued to increase. By 1870, it was possible to cross America by train, and the building of railways in many other countries allowed people and progress to move quickly across the world. Hello, and welcome to this recording brought to you by the British Council.
Overpopulation by John Cootie. I come from the south of England, in the most densely populated corner of a small island, which you might think is full of people. The UK as a whole has 2.4 people per hectare. I have never gone hungry. The only time when I wished there were less people is on rush hour trains. However, one of the most interesting findings of the census of 2001 was that 1 million people were missing. Or at least, there were 1 million people less than the authorities expected. Should we be happy that we have more space and less mouths to feed? I don't know. As I start writing this article, the world population, according to the Office of Population Research at Princeton University, stands at 6,315,850,431. Doom, version 1. In 1798, Robert Malthus wrote an essay which got economics the name of the dismal science. It was called The Principle of Population. He said that it was impossible for the number of people to increase, and even worse, it was impossible for the standard of living to rise. The argument went like this. 1. Population naturally increases geometrically. 2, 4, 8, 16. 2. Food production increases arithmetically. 2, 4, 6, 8. 3. So population will be controlled by lack of food, the same as it is for animals. Some people will always be starving. A lot of people disliked Malthus's point of view, often because it seemed to go against the idea of progress, which was so important for other social theories of the time. Anyway, the experience of the next 2 centuries shows that something must be wrong with the theory. In the 19th century, world population rose from 1 to 1.7 billion. In the 20th, it increased to about 6 billion. Doom version 2. In 1961, J.G. Ballard wrote a story called Millennium. It's about a world where the population has gone on increasing at 3% a year to reach a figure of at least 20 billion, although the true number is kept secret. To make space for growing food, everyone lives in giant cities where the buildings are divided into little cubicles. A single person can have 4 square meters and a married couple 6. Everyone has enough to eat, but life is certainly very inconvenient. People spend most of the time waiting in queues for the bathroom or anywhere else they want to go.
Cosmetic or plastic surgery often evokes images of famous personalities wanting to alter their appearances through elective surgical procedures. However, reconstructive surgery is a procedure that makes a similar but different impact on the lives of many around the world. And many of these patients suffer from either congenital defects, like a cleft palate, or from injuries sustained in accidents or as a result of animal bites. Some disfigurements can also be due to the effects of disease or infection. Yet the individual with such defects often bears more than just outward physical marks. Loss of hope and self-worth, as well as acceptance, are commonplace. In the past, such procedures were only available in developed countries where the medical expertise and financial resources were available to afford such operations. However, a number of worldwide organizations made up of volunteers make regular visits to developing countries to provide reconstructive surgery to those who could not otherwise receive such care. In addition to the care they provide, these volunteer specialists also provide training to healthcare workers in these procedures so that local hospitals, nurses, and doctors can become self-sufficient. The end results of such efforts have transformed lives. The patient now can live with some normalcy and hope for the future with less fear of being ostracized by neighbors and family. And the healthcare worker who performs the procedure perhaps feels a greater understanding and compassion for those who suffer from such defects. There are many ways for people to assist in supporting these volunteer efforts. Although most people do not have the medical expertise to perform reconstructive surgery, they can still donate time, money, and supplies to such organizations. A quick search on the internet can get you started.
Hello, and welcome to this recording brought to you by the British Council. Physical Education by Richard Sidaway. School days are supposed to be the best days of your life, and part of that experience usually involves some strenuous physical activity. I asked some colleagues to give me their recollections of what happened to them on the sports field and beyond, and this is what they told me. Cup winners. When I was about 10, my friend Steve told me, the football team from our year inexplicably made it to the cup final of the local school's league. I say inexplicably because I only remember us losing nearly every match we played. Anyway, in the final, I set up the winning goal, a brilliant cross to my mate David, who headed the ball in just before the final whistle. I still have a photograph of the team holding the cup. Forest hike. Thomas said, I remember having to lead a group of 8 boys on a school expedition for the best part of 2 days when I was a teenager. Even though we got lost at one point, I managed to keep them all together and got them from one end of a large forest to the other and back by sheer force of will. I was chosen to be the leader, I think, because I was the only one who knew how to read a map. When we arrived back at the campsite, we found out that all the other groups had cheated and hitched most of the way instead. I felt a bit of a mug, but also rather proud of myself at the same time for having done it properly. learning to swim, learning to drown. According to Lawrence, I learned to swim comparatively late, I suppose. I was maybe 9 years old, but my brother had a traumatic experience which nearly put him off for life. We lived in the USA for a while and had access to a university pool where the coaches had trained the American Olympic team. In those days, though, their idea of teaching kids how to swim was to tie a tin can to their ankles with a bit of string, throw them in the deep end and shout, "Swim!" I'm surprised my brother survived at all. He could only have been about 6 at the time. Sponsored walk. Joy said, "One of my earliest physical feats was probably going on a 10-mile walk for charity when I was about 7. I went with my older brother and my dad, but they didn't make much allowance for the fact that my legs were shorter. I had to go at the same pace as them. Even so, I made it and raised quite a lot of money from school friends and teachers who had agreed to pay me for every mile I walked." Cross-country ordeal. I remember one dark, wet afternoon in February being herded out onto the school field and having to run 3 miles across country while the rain came bucketing down, my friend David told me. Soon we were all drenched to the skin, shivering with cold, and the only way to stay warm was to keep running. One of the gym teachers, who had been sitting inside having a cup of tea, came out to meet us halfway around the course and told us to jump over a stream before we could start on the home stretch. This teacher actually stood on the hands of the boys he didn't like as they were trying to climb up the muddy bank on the other side, so that they slid back down into the freezing water. I was disgusted by this, but of course I didn't say anything. I was only 12. I think it changed my view of human nature a bit after that, the fact that someone who I had previously respected could be so cynical and cruel. Dwarfed in Germany. William said, "We went on a tour of Germany one year from secondary school to play football against 3 different teams there. Everyone was violently sick on the ferry going across to Holland, and the whole thing was a bit of a farce, as the teacher who had arranged it didn't speak German very well. So we ended up playing teams who were 3 or 4 years older than us. Naturally, we got beaten every time." Climb every mountain. According to Duncan, one of my best memories of early physical endeavour was climbing Ben Nevis, which is the tallest mountain in the British Isles. It was a glorious day, which is pretty rare for that part of Scotland, and we walked up in about 5 hours. The last bit is pretty hard going, as it's a zigzag path of big stones. We took the family dog, and she had a really difficult time of it. The strangest thing was that we didn't see too many people on the way up, and then, when we reached the top, it was suddenly covered with Japanese tourists. I can only presume they had been airlifted there by helicopter. Down to earth. Philip told me. My cousins were always the outdoor adventurous types, learning how to canoe and windsurf and abseil and so on. One day, one of them climbed onto the top of the house to fix some tiles with my uncle. The next minute, he appeared at the kitchen door, a little bit dazed, and his mother, who was cooking lunch, looked at him in surprise and said, "What are you doing here? I thought you were helping your dad." "I've just fallen off the roof, Mum," he said. Apparently he had overbalanced and toppled over backwards. Because he had recently been doing parachute training, his latest hobby, he had rolled over automatically when he hit the ground, without thinking. This was a big, old 2-story house, and he must have been at least 10 metres from the ground. But he didn't have a scratch on him. We hope you've enjoyed this recording.
We hear it a lot in the news these days. Recycle newspapers and save a tree. Collect bottles and cans so they can be reused in the manufacturing of new products. Protecting our delicate environment seems to be on the agenda of politicians, government leaders, and citizens in many parts of the world to show support for Mother Nature. The concept of green consumerism has gained momentum more and more over the last decade, and the public feels moved to pitch in and help. However, 3 essential keys need to power this movement